Russia is using many techniques in its hybrid war against Ukraine, but key amongst them is its information war. How information is twisted, controlled, retained and spread is all part of this. NATO Review visited the scene of one of the former Soviet Union's worst abuses of information, the cover-up of a nuclear explosion in Chernobyl, to see how its information techniques then caused suffering which could be continuing even today.
There has been a nuclear accident in the Soviet Union, and the Soviets have admitted that it happened. One of the atomic reactors at the Chernobyl atomic power plant near the city of Kiev was damaged, and there is speculation in Moscow that people were injured and may have died.
On the night of the 26th of April 1986, a test was being carried out at the Chernobyl nuclear reactors. A surge of energy led to a massive explosion in reactor number 4. The resulting radioactive clouds soon started moving north. Eventually, it had reached an area of Europe stretching from Ukraine to the Atlantic Ocean. And this, over my left shoulder with the yellow scaffolding, is reactor number 4. This is the reactor which exploded on the night of April the 26th. 1986, sending a plume of radiation into the atmosphere. Today, as you can see, a Geiger counter which would normally reach about 0.12 on a normal street is reading 2.43, and the readings in this area have reached up to 7. So how was information provided to the people most at risk, those living in the area? There were 2 evacuations. The first was of the people in the nearest big town, Pripyat.
Sure, all of them had got information about the explosion of the nuclear power plant, but they didn't know to believe or not believe in that. But next day after the accident, they could see a lot of buses on this way. They were evacuated inhabitants of Pripyat. You can imagine 50,000 people. They will use about 1,500 buses for that.
Was it a temporary evacuation?
As for Pripyat town, they were sure that they'll come back here very soon, because when they were told, okay, yes, in 3 days, they really believed that they'll be back in 3 days.
In 1986, the major operation of evacuation of people in this area was in Pripyat, the new town down the road. That had only been built in 1970, so nobody had lived there for more than 16 years. But perhaps those who suffered more were those who lived in the villages around Pripyat. They were told also that they had to leave and that they would probably be back in 3 days. In fact, they never came back, and the houses over the road there were all destroyed and buried underground. And now all that is left of this still very radioactive area is this kindergarten. But tell me about the information. What kind of information did the people from this village receive?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing.
And they're just 4 kilometers from the reactor and they got no information at all. And the treatment of these villagers, where the level of radiation was up to 1,000 times the normal amount, was even worse than that of the people in the town.
This village, it was evacuated just on the 3rd of May of 1986. Okay. Just in a week after the explosion. So we can imagine how dangerous for people was to stay here.
The news story of a nuclear accident in the Soviet Union was not broken by the Soviet Union, but by Swedish scientists. They discovered that the high level of radiation over Sweden in April 1986 was due to an accident in the east. Shortly after, the Soviet Union downplayed the incident, announcing only this very brief statement.
На Чернобыльской атомной электростанции произошла авария. Поврежден один из атомных реакторов. Принимаются меры по ликвидации последствий аварии. Пострадавшим оказывается помощь.
But why should the actions of the Soviets nearly 30 years ago have anything to do with today's Russia? Firstly, the control of Chernobyl lay not in Kiev, but in Moscow. The way that the accident was dealt with came straight from the Politburo in Russia. And secondly, many of the techniques employed then, such as issuing denials, sowing confusion, and others, are being used again today in Ukraine. Information played a key role in this. By not informing the people most at risk, thousands were exposed to dangerously high levels of radiation. By lying to local residents that they would only need to leave for 3 days, lives were ruined, and by not informing neighbouring countries of the dangers, thousands more were exposed unnecessarily. One of the characteristics of this town of Pripyat, right next to the Chernobyl reactor, is that it had a lot of children, and so this fairground was built to give them something to play with. There was just one problem. It was due to open on the 1st of May 1986. 3 days beforehand, the entire town of 50,000 people was evacuated, and the children of Pripyat would never play here. So as we see Russia playing fast and loose with information in Ukraine in 2014, it's worth remembering the victims of the 1986 information campaign. And some victims still suffer from that today.